Hi, welcome to the episode 8 of Freaked Out Podcast for one more time. I'm re-recording this episode. I recorded this episode already last week, but just my voice sounded so tired and so boring because I was tired. I was really tired. And if I don't purposely tell myself, this may sound weird, but if I don't purposely tell myself to sound interested in something and enthusiastic about something, I tend to sound really bored. My voice was so monotone, and I decided to record this episode all over again. So hi, welcome to the episode 8 of Freaked Out Podcast. My name is Fabian Adams, and I will be your host for today. Today we have our long story. Well, it's long for me at least. And it's a really interesting story. A lot of you maybe already know the story from the movie that came out later. It was a really popular movie, and it's one of the kind of really popular stories, true crime stories. And many people don't actually know that this movie is based on a true story, on a real life story. And just let me remind you, my folks, the outside world is way much scarier than the fictional world. So don't be surprised when you hear stories like this, because it's wild out there. Also, quick plug-in for my second podcast. I started my Serbian podcast, so if you are listening this from Balkans, go there. It's called Strogo Poverljivo, which means strictly confidential, and I will leave the link in the description of this episode. So if you want to check that out, you can go there. And if you're asking, how am I gonna host 2 parallel podcasts? Well, I'm asking myself that too, very often. And after this quick plug-in, we will jump into the story. So I will tell you a story about the missing of Elizabeth Fritzl. Some of you may gasp right now because you know the story. And if you don't know the story, then you will have a wild ride. Just gonna say that. So it's September 1984, and we are in Austria. And the woman named Rosemary Fritzl files a missing persons report on her daughter, Elizabeth Fritzl. She says that her daughter is missing since the August 24th. So it's September, and she is missing since April 24th. They right away pronounce her as a missing person, and they start the search. However, the search was unsuccessful, and Elizabeth seemed gone from the face of Earth. And then almost a month goes by, and then her father comes to the police, and he's holding a letter in his hand. And his name was Josef Fritzl, and he claimed that the letter came signed by Elizabeth. In that letter, she allegedly said that she was tired of living with her family, so therefore she moved to her friend. But she didn't state which friend it was. And she urges her parents to stop the search because she's fine. You know, I'm fine, guys. I'm just so bored of you that I moved with my friend. I'm fine. She also said that she will leave the country if they don't stop the search. So she's fine, I guess. Okay. And her father, Joseph, or Josef, because this is in Germany, Austria, Germany, it's pronounced Josef, so I'll call him Joseph anyway. Her father, Joseph, was convinced that she left to join the satanic cult. Okay. Very natural response, I guess. Well, this was the time of satanic panic, you know, the prime time, and all around the world as well in Austria. And it was the time when Jonestown was also happening, and revealing stuff was happened. So I guess his natural response to his daughter running away was she ran away to join the satanic cult and worship Satan. So who was Joseph? Joseph, or Josef, was born in 1935. When he was 21 years old, he married Rosemary, who was 17 at the time. They got married very soon, and they got many children. To be precise, 3 sons and 4 daughters, including Elizabeth, who got born in 1966 as a 4th child. And it was known that his mother was very abusive towards him when he was a child, which later in the years resulted in him sexualizing her. So this is Freud's playground, basically. And he was raised during the main Nazi era in Austria. You know that Austria and Germany were centers of Nazi during the Second World War. And he often referred to himself as an alibi child, which meant that his mother only gave birth to him to prove people that she's not infertile, and her husband, really rough, but he was not a wanted child from the start. And then through his whole growing up, he got molested by his mother, which sometimes can result in sexualizing the abuser, and that happened here. Josef was convicted of sexually assaulting a co-worker while he was married to Rosemary, for which he served 12 months in prison. He basically bursted into her home and sexually assaulted her while holding a knife under her throat. And this happened, as I said, while he was married to Rosemary, so she apparently went over it and forgave him, because when he got out of the prison, he moved in back with her. There were no more, major incidents, except he was suspected of a murder of a 17-year-old girl, Martina Posch, who was found wrapped in plastic and sexually assaulted near his house. So he was suspected of that, but nothing came out of that. And there were no more incidents in the family until Elizabeth allegedly ran away with her friend, apparently to worship Satan, as Joseph believed. And then several years passed by, 2 or 3. And there was still no trace of Elizabeth, nowhere. She was gone. And then, one day, a baby appears on Fritzl's porch. Like in the movies, a baby in a basket in front of their front door. And there was also a note written by Elizabeth, in which she begs them to raise her child as her own, since she is not capable of giving the child the life it deserves. So basically, she had a child, and then she sent them that child in a basket and asked them to raise it as their own, because she's too busy worshipping Satan, apparently. They were shocked, but they accepted that, and they soon became the official foster parents, legal foster parents to the child. However, in the next couple of years, 2 more babies appear with the same message. Where are these babies coming from? It's raining, baby. Hallelujah. What the fuck is going on? Elizabeth, please stop producing children and sending them. And these poor people, what they could do? They accepted and raised their grandchildren as their own. You're not gonna, send away your grandchild. And then nothing happens for 24 years. 24 years. Not a single nothing. And then Joseph, who is now 72 years old, suddenly brings 19-year-old girl named Kirsten to the hospital. She had a severe kidney failure. Now, who the fuck is Kirsten? She's not, by the way, one of the babies that arrived in the mail. Joseph claimed that Kirsten is Elizabeth's another daughter, and that she sent her to their house to seek for medical help. And this poor girl, she was in such bad condition that she had to be put in induced coma. Doctors were naturally alarmed because she didn't have any medical records, and by the way, she had a kidney failure that she had to be put in coma. They didn't know anything about her medical history, and most importantly, where the fuck is her mother? Elizabeth, hello? So they decided to make a public call on television, calling Elizabeth to come forward and bring some medical history records about her daughter. And boy oh boy, Elizabeth appears. So after being missing for 24 plus years, she just casually walks in with her father to the hospital. And to remind you once again, she was missing for 24 years. So, what the hell happened, and where was Elizabeth Fritzl? When she was left alone with the doctors, she said that she wants to confess and tell the whole story, but with one condition. She doesn't want to meet her father ever again. Dun, dun, dun. So, now, listen closely. She said that her father started sexually assaulting her when she was only 11 years old. And now she is now 42. So you probably think that was the reason she ran away from home. Well, she also said that her father kept her locked in their house basement for 24 years. She also said that she gave birth to 7 children, all of her father's, Josef Fritzl. Pum, pum, pum. So let's start from the very beginning of this circus. Josef Fritzl, when he married a Rosemary, he bought this old, huge house. And shortly after moving in, they started renovating the house. And he, parallel with that, started building this basement with the help of his brother-in-law. However, nobody knew why he wanted to have that basement. Why? A completely soundproof basement under the whole house. The construction lasted almost 4 years, and in 1984, on August 24th, he lured his 18-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, into the basement, who he has already sexually assaulted for 7 years prior. So he lured her in with the story that he needs help with the door. She had to hold the door until he attaches it onto the frame. And little did she know that she was actually helping her father put a finishing lid onto her prison cell, where she would live, get assaulted, and give birth to her father's children for the next 24 years. Horrendous. He dragged her inside and he chained her inside. And during this period of 24 years, I keep repeating this because it's so shocking. He came down to beat her and sexually assaulted her almost every day. And in the first several years or months, probably years, she was actually chained to a wall. The basement had multiple sound isolations, so not a single sound escaped that room. Her poor mother, who was searching for her, was unaware that her daughter was living through hell, basically below her feet. Josef even forced her to write fake letters when he was sending the babies, and the first letter, when she said that she ran away with her friends, he forced her to write that. So Elizabeth gave birth to 7 children during her captivity. Her first pregnancy were even twins. And if this story cannot get even more tragic, shortly after giving birth, one of those twins passed away. And the other one was the first baby that appeared on the porch, if you remember. The remains of the baby that died, Josef cremated in the backyard when his wife was on a trip. So she saw nothing. Neighbors also saw nothing, apparently. And the other 2 children who were removed from the basement were Lisa, Monica, Alexander. And the first one was called, I believe it was called Michael. We'll see later. But I believe it's Michael. So the other children were Lisa, Monica, and Alexander. And they lived with the Fritzls upstairs as a normal children. And the family was regularly visited by social workers who saw nothing and heard nothing. And they were visited by social workers because they became legal, foster parents. And Josef didn't even keep his visit to basement a secret. Everybody knew he visited the basement every day. But he visited the basement every day, apparently to, as he said, to sketch plans of the machines he would later sell to companies. And he didn't allow anyone to go into the basement. Even his wife was not allowed to, come near the door. And on one occasion, he spent the whole night in the basement. And in the morning, his wife brought him coffee and started knocking on the door, and he got really mad. And nobody was like, let me in, 24 years passed and I haven't seen your office, your workspace. Let me in. You know that meme. Let me in. That would be me, probably. To make things even more bizarre, they rented a small part of the house to some guy, and he later testified that he indeed heard noises from the basement sometimes, but Josef always reassured him that those noises came from heating pipes. I didn't know that heating pipes sound like, help me! After the birth of the 4th child, Josef decides to enlarge the basement. With the work of Elizabeth, by the way. So after all she went through, now she had to dig up soil and build a larger prison for herself. With bare hands. I have no comments. The rest of the children stayed down with her because her mother once said that she couldn't raise any more children. So Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix were the children who were downstairs. So she had 7 children, and upstairs were Lisa, Monica, and Alexander, and downstairs were Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix. Then Michael is probably the 7th child that passed away. And they had even television in there, cable television, a radio, a cassette player, fridge, and stove, like functional, place, except they were locked in under the ground. And if they misbehaved, Joseph punished them by cutting their lights out for days, or not giving them food for days. And if they tried to escape, he told them that he would kill them with the gas if they tried to escape. He also said that they would be electrocuted if they tried to open the door. And by the way, all of those threats were fake. He was like, this is going to happen if you try to escape, don't. And it was all fake. Lies. The first 5 years, Elizabeth was all alone in the basement. And she said that part of her life was the most difficult part of her life. She said that it became much easier after Joseph allowed the children to stay with her because she had something to do, basically, to occupy her time. She spent time teaching them to write and draw. They watched television, and she often explained to them what the outside world looks like. This is so sad. They were often getting sick since they have never seen the sun. They had major vitamin D deficiency, a lot of allergies because of the mold, and in the end, poor Kirsten even had kidney failure. She also had fainting spells. On April 19th, 2008, Joseph agreed to seek medical help for Kirsten after she fell unconscious. That day was the day Elizabeth came out of the basement for the first time in 24 years, because she helped Joseph carry out Kirsten. Then he forced her to return inside and locked her in once again, and she lived her final week as a prisoner of her father in the following days. After Kirsten, who was 19 years old, by the way, 19 years old, that's more than a half of my life. She was out in the real world for the first time, and she was driven to the hospital in life-threatening condition. And Joseph came with her, and he brought the letter he claimed Elizabeth sent him, in which, if you remember, she begs them to have the daughter. And doctors were puzzled by Joseph's claims, and they alerted the police, who then broadcasted the appeal on live TV, calling Elizabeth to come forward and bring Kirsten's medical documents. They also reopened Elizabeth's missing files and questioned her father once again. He repeated his story how his daughter joined satanic cult once again, and he doesn't know where she is. He showed them the most recent letter that was apparently sent from the town Kemeton. Kemeton. I believe it's Kemeton. Sorry, all Kemetons.
Oh my God!
At home, Elizabeth begged her father to be taken to the hospital. Like she saw the public appeal since she had a TV, and she begged her father to be taken to the hospital, and she finally succeeded to convince him. And on April 26th, he released her from the basement alongside with her sons Felix and Stefan. And this is the first time the boys saw the outside world, ever. The same as Kirsten. After they came to the hospital and Elizabeth stayed alone with the doctor, she alarmed the doctor and the police, as I mentioned before, that she will explain everything if they provide her to not see her father ever again. Police detained Joseph, and they took them both to the police station where they were questioned, where Elizabeth was questioned. It took her 2 whole hours to tell everything. In short terms, everything she survived over 24 years in captivity. She said that her father made her watch porn movies and then forced her to reenact certain scenes with him in front of her children in order to basically humiliate her. And shortly after midnight that same day, the investigators completed the case. They had the case. Josef Fritzl was finally arrested in his 73rd year of life on suspicions of serious crimes against family members. In the next few days, it was confirmed via DNA that he is the biological father of his grandchildren, whatever. Although the DNA test was proving this, that he was the father, Josef's defense lawyer was like, well, yes, this was incest, but we still need proof of sexual assault and enslavement. What? Josef himself claimed that the sexual assaulting was not happening and that it was all consensual. He claimed that Elizabeth willingly stayed locked in his basement and had sex with her father, apparently. And he said, quote, I knew that what I was doing was not right, that I must have been crazy to do such a thing, but it became a normal occurrence to lead a second life in the basement of my home, end quote. Well, yes, maybe it sounds, adrenaline pumping or intriguing, but that was your fucking daughter. He even said that they were so ungrateful for reporting this to the police, since he tried his best to make the basement comfortable home for them. He brought flowers for Elizabeth every time he came down. He brought toys and books for the children. They watched TV together. They had meals together in the bunker, how he actually called the basement. He called it the bunker. Like a normal family. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's your daughter. And she and her children, and your children, basically. All of the children are yours, including Elizabeth, and you're locking them in your basement and raping her. Like, what are you talking about? He said that the main reason for locking Elizabeth in the basement forever, basically, was that she was not listening to him anymore and she started going out and drinking. She was 17 years old, by the way. He said that, quote-unquote, he wanted to protect her from the outside world. Aww, he's such a great father. And he also wanted, in his words, he wanted to teach her discipline in a Nazi way. If you remember, he was raised in prime Nazi era. And later, during the search of the house, the police found a written plan about abducting his daughter for his own gratification. So none of this is true. He just wanted to have sex with his daughter and keep her as his slave in the basement. They also found a letter she wrote in which she said how she wanted to return to the family, but, quote-unquote, it was not possible yet. And it was believed that Josef planned to release them one day, while pretending that he heroically rescued them from satanic cult. Such a... Oh my God. After psychiatrical evaluation, it was concluded that he had severe combined personality disorder, which contained elements of schizophrenia. It was recommended that he receive medical help for the rest of his life. I say let him rot in prison. But that's probably why am I not a judge? Over 300 officers worked on this case. And because Elizabeth didn't want to see her father ever again, she couldn't attend the trial. Instead, she gave a video-recorded testimony that lasted 11 hours. And that testimony, in the whole testimony of 11 hours, was played in the courtroom. However, she decided to attend the trial, and she was wearing a wig, so he doesn't recognize her. The plan sadly failed, and Josef saw her and he started crying after he recognized her, and he begged her to forgive him. Like, cry me a river, Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up and let this woman live her life, finally. In November 2008, authorities released an indictment on Josef Fritzl. He stood trial for the murder and dispose of the remains of the infant Michael, yes, that infant was Michael, who died shortly after birth, facing 10 to life in prison. He was also charged with rape, incest, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and slavery, which carry maximum of 20 years sentence. And he was convicted in the end to 18 years. I'm rolling my eyes. So he basically took 24 years of his daughter's life, and he got less than 20 years in prison. Great job. Elizabeth and all of her children were reunited, and they tried to start a new life as much as they could after all of this. They have a social worker that visits them every week, and that social worker said that they all were afraid of doors, basically. I understand completely. They even take the doors off the frames at the night. And her mother, Rosemary, lived with them for some time, but she later moved out and she is currently now living in an apartment. She could not live in that house anymore. Like, I wish them all the best from the bottom of my heart. I can't even imagine how hard it is for them to live like nothing happened. Sorry, there is a siren outside. Oh, it's the police. They're coming to get me. So I wish them all the best. And Joseph, in the meantime, will be liable for parole in 2024. So next year, he's still alive, and he will be liable for parole next year. He also wrote a book in 2022. Like, what the fuck who wants to read that? I certainly don't. And he, in the meantime, started studying law in the prison, so he can defend himself on that parole in 2024. And he also tried to sue Elizabeth for defamation. He even sent them letters demanding money. However, she refused to accept those letters, so they were all returned to him. She cut ties for good, as she should. He also divorced his wife, Rosemary, because the reason was she never visited him in the prison. So he was offended and he decided to divorce her. And if this story sounded familiar, that's because there was a movie called Girl in the Basement. And that movie got, like, as I said in the beginning of the episode, got major success. And a lot of people know that movie. So here you have it. The real story behind the movie, The Girl in the Basement. Thank you so much for listening this episode. And I also want to say that the summer's coming and we will have the summer schedule for the future episodes. And that means that the episodes will probably, I don't know from which episode, probably from episode 10, the episodes will come out every 2 weeks until September or late August. So there will be no new episode every week, but on every second week. And it will probably start after the episode 10. So thank you so much for being here. If you want to listen to more stories, check out our profiles on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, like literally everywhere, and on Serbian platform podcast.rs. Once again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you next time. And bye, guys.